Hello, everybody, and welcome to this Microsoft Reactor event today. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you're tuning in from the world. My name is Erica. Oh, there I am. Hi. My name is Erica, and I am the program manager at Microsoft Reactor Stockholm. Before we begin, I would just like to say a quick word about Microsoft's Code of Conduct. We are all here to learn, so please be welcoming and respectful and understanding of differences of all points of views. That was it for me, really. I will now welcome our speaker, Johan Norberg, who is our dear colleague here in Microsoft Sweden, and he is a cloud solution architect. Hi, Johan. How are you today?
Hi, Erica. Thank you. I'm very fine, thank you. I'm eager to talk about Blazor today.
Woohoo! Introduction to
Yay!
Blazor web apps. Great. It's great to have you here. Looking forward to this session. Guys out there, please let us know where you're tuning in from. Let's keep the chat nice and lively. Ask your questions, and Johan is going to reply to them at the end. His session is going to run for about 30-ish, 35 minutes, something like that. And then we will have some time for Q&A at the end. But yeah, that's me. I'm going to put myself in the background. So I hand the word over to you, Johan.
Thank you so much. So let's
Bye.
get started. Blazor. For you of you who are old enough to remember ASP.NET web forms back in the days, I think Blazor is what we all hoped web forms would be. So it's like the dream suddenly came true 20 years later. So let's get into it. There are two different ways to use Blazor, which is a full stack web app framework for .NET, and you can use it like Blazor server, that the logic runs on your server, but it's presented in the browser. And you can also use WebAssembly versions that runs completely in the browser. And they have some positives and some negative things with them. So for the server version that uses Signal R to communicate between the client and the server, you need a live connection to the server. And some of the better things with it is that your code runs on the server, so it's fast, and it's fast to start up because you don't need to download as much stuff. And it supports older and slower browsers. But the negative things is that you do need a fast and reliable internet connection. And there are more UI latencies since everything is processed on the server and just more or less streamed to the browser. And when you use WebAssembly, it's almost like it's opposite. It runs fully on the client side, so it can work offline very well. You can host it as a static web app with just HTML files and static files. But the drawbacks here is that you need to download more stuff to the client. So the minimum size you need to download to even get a hello world started is about 1 megabyte or some megabyte-ish. And since it runs in the browser with the WebAssembly, it's might be slower runtime performance than the server things. And some of the things that came with some improvements that came with .NET 6 is that it now uses ahead of time compilation. So the compilation is running faster because you don't have to do that in the browser at startup. And also they managed to shrink the app download size a bit. So that's why it's now about 1 megabyte. Before it was closer to 2 megabytes. And some other stuff that's making this more useful. And a close sibling to Blazor is using Blazor together with .NET MAUI. I don't know if you heard of MAUI yet, but it is our way of doing cross-platform apps natively on Windows, macOS, iOS, and Android with the same code base, just to publish different binaries to each platform. And you can also use Blazor in MAUI. So it's a combination of a web view and that the actual code runs natively on the telephone or your computer. And these are the topics for today. So it will be more like a beginner's overview, but I will try to cover as many areas that we need to make a good app as I possibly can. And then at the end, you will get a link to a learning path on Microsoft Learn that goes deeper into these topics and also touch on some other topics as well. So we will talk about page routing to navigate between pages and how to pass data to pages through the URLs, how to build custom components and reusable components, and the usual suspects with the forms and event handlers, and also data binding and things like that. And finally, we'll talk about state management and how to fetch data from like other APIs or your database or whatever. And this is how you can get started from the command line. You can, of course, use this as a file new in Visual Studio as well. But since it works everywhere, you can use it on Mac or Linux or Windows, and you can use VS Code or Visual Studio or .NET Rider or whatever. So .NET new Blazor server, that tells us that we want a server-side project. -O and the name of the app we want to create, and then we can also specify which framework we want to use. So you could use like Net 7 here if you want to try the bleeding edge stuff that will be released in November. And the same thing for if you want to create a WebAssembly app. It's just .NET new, Blazor, WASM, and the same parameters. And this will get you a boilerplate project with all the dependencies you need. And so you can get started and play around with this. And to create components in Blazor, you can also do that from the command line if you want to. .NET new raise a component and specify the name, the folder, and the framework. You don't have to use the .NET tooling to create new components. It's just a file with a Razor file extension. So it's super easy to do that in your editor as well. Okay, page routing, how we navigate between pages. So the real magic here is just to add an attribute at the top of the file named @page, and then what the URL to this page should be. Then you could navigate to like yourdomain.com/product in this case. And when navigating between pages, we can use like a regular A tag if you want to, but there are components that add some helpful things here, and that is called navlink. It's basically a regular anchor tag, but with some extra stuff, like the match attribute that I have here. So what happens is that when you navigate to a page, Blazor will automatically add a active CSS class for the active link. And the navlink match all in this case tells it you need to match this URL exactly. And for the about link, anything below the About page will mark this link as active. So that is quite nice when you're doing navigation and maybe you want to make the active page bold or another color or something. You can also navigate through code like in an event handler if you need to do that. And then you need to inject the navigation manager so you can get the reference to that. And then somewhere in your code, you can call navigate to method and just the name of the route that you want to navigate to. And in .NET 7, this is not in .NET 6 yet, you can also add the state to the navigation, just the way you can with the regular JavaScript and the push-pop state. So we can add a string to the state. And this string could, of course, be serialized JSON if you need to pass like a whole object. And we can get that on the other page with history entry state property. So some improvements coming in .NET 7 regarding navigation. And back to routing, we can pass or specify variables or params in our routes. So in this case, we have a URL that would be product/something like product/1. And here we will automatically populate the ID property with the value from that URL. So what we need to do is add the attribute parameter to our property. And then we'll automatically look in the URL for the ID name and get that value. And you can also get values from the query string. It's a little bit more work involved, but it's perfectly possible to use query strings as well. Okay, let's talk about some components. And components is basically some smaller useful component that you have that do something. And if you ever work with Angular or React, I think you're quite familiar with this. And to a component, you can pass some additional data that is used as state in the child component. And in the you can also use event handlers and the usual suspects, so that if you get a click in a button on the child component, you can handle that in the parent component, for instance. We also have a couple of form events like on click and the usual JavaScript events can be used to run C# code as well. And so the magic here is to use the @ symbol before the event handler. We can have pretty nice form validation. If you ever worked with ASP.NET before, I think you will recognize this quite well. On your model class, you can set attributes like required or min length or max length or what data type it is, like email address or credit card or things like that. And then when we validate the form, it will check these properties or attributes and automatically make sure that it's valid. So this is an example of the model class, and this is an example how we could use this in our Blazor views. So we need to wrap our form with an edit form and pass the model. And we can specify 3 event handlers here. I've used 2 of them just to point out that you can have one for when the form is valid and one where it's invalid. And there's also one more generic that is just like on submit, and you can check if it's valid or not yourself. And then we've added some data annotation validator and a validation summary. The first one, check that the form is actually valid with your requirements. And the validation summary you might recognize from ASP.NET earlier, that prints out a summary of all the validation errors on the form. And for each field, we can also display the error message for that, like the validation message for, and then we can get the error for that model property. We can get references to regular HTML elements with the ref. This works quite similar to how it works in React, if you have experience with that. So with this, we can do things like setting the focus in a text box or similar things. We can also use it to pass to JavaScript with interop if we need to do more native stuff in the browser. Okay, next topic, data binding between components. So I mentioned earlier that we can have a parameter that comes from the URL. And in this case, that's not exactly what I wanted. Yeah, it is. Sorry, I'm confused. So we can set a parameter and a property, and that will be exposed to the component when it's used. So we can use that here to set it here. This is, if you use to React, this would be the similar to a prop. And when we want to view this or use it in the view, we can just use the @ sign and then the property name. Oh, sorry, that was wrong. This one, increment count, and it's used here. So private variables are internal state, and parameters are public props. Cascading parameters are somewhat similar to regular parameters, but they are available for all children in the hierarchy. So say you have like a parent component and a child component that has a child component that has a child component. You can get the cascading parameters wherever you want in this hierarchy. So you don't need to pass the same value as a argument to each and every one of the child components. So we define those with the cascading values, we give it a name, and we set the value of it. And then later in any child component that is deeper in the hierarchy, we can use the attribute cascading parameter and just specify the name and use that as a regular state deeper. So if you use to React, this would kind of be like a context that you can pass and get data all the way down. Event handlers are used to have an internal event handler in a child component, but it's the parent component that actually do things with it. So we can expose a public property with the event callback type, and also with generic specified type if we want. And then somewhere in our code, we can call this event handler with invoke async. And that will then be handled in the parent component with, in this case, on click callback and then the callback for that. So sometimes it's useful for the parent component to handle the state, and the child components are just more like they just do stuff. They don't think as much. This is another cool thing for data binding. So instead of having one property for the value and one property for like an on change handler, we can use chained bindings. So, and in this case, we use the @bind dash and then the name of the property we want to bind to. So for the child component, we specify a parameter with a property called number, and we have a parameter called number changed. So it's important to keep this naming thing like number and then number and the event we want to expose. And same thing here, event callback. And then we, just like before, invoke async and to trigger the event. And in the parent component, this would be like, it will update the value on changes and will also display the value when it comes in. So a little less boilerplate code for the consumers of a component. So for every example I've shown has the code block together with the view, which sometimes is nice. When it's a bit more code, it might be nice to have it in a separate code file. So we can have code behind files, just as we could in web forms and MVC views. And the important thing here is that we need to inherit from our base class. So we need to specify that in the view. And then the code behind file, naming convention is just razor.cs. We make a public class that extends component base. So this would be the thing that we had in the code block in a regular view. We can also use templates, like if we want to have some grid or a table view or list view or something that repeats data, we can use this to make things a little bit easier. So the thing here is you need to, first, we need to create the actual templates. We'll start there. And in this case, it would render a table that has a header and also has rows. And we can specify the row type so that each consumer of this component can specify what type the data is. So it works better. And then in the code block, this is the magic. We have a public parameter of type render fragment. And what render fragment does is that all the content that is a child or regular HTML, so it's not an attribute, it's more just HTML, like here and here. This will be the content of the render fragment. And the same thing for our row template. We can have a render fragment and also see that the row type is included here. So with this, you can create templated controls that I would probably use it a lot for grids and things like that repeat a lot of data. Or maybe like a tab view that you can specify each heading and the content of the tab. And there's also a free library of components that is ready for use, and you can use it to create UIs that looks like Windows or Teams or Office. So it's more like a Microsoft design language ready components that we can use. And where would we be if we couldn't store state in our apps? So there are a couple of different ways to do this. We can use some server-side storage, of course, like a database or a Redis cache or something like that. We can store data in the URL with a query string, for instance. And we can also use browser storage, like local storage or session storage. And finally, we can use an in-memory state container service. So since Blazor is basically ASP.NET Core, we can use dependency injection. So we can register a regular class in the dependency injection manager and use that everywhere in the app. And this is an example of how to use the local storage, or session storage in the app. So we can use await protected session store, and there is also a protected local store. And we can get values and we can set values. And we need to inject this at the top. And regarding, maybe you can, when we want to access like maybe external data or database stuff, we can also use dependency injections for that. So we can define our data service with some like find all, get all, insert, update, the usual suspects. We add those as a singleton to our service, and then we can inject that into a view and use it somewhere. In this case, it will fetch some data when the component is loaded. So the on initialized async, this will be called after initialization completes and all parameters are set, but it will be called before the page is rendered. So this is an excellent place to get data that is needed to render things. And then, of course, it's good to always check that we actually have some data. So this service could potentially call your database, but here maybe you need to be aware that you maybe don't want to call the database when you're running in the client, because then you would need to expose secrets that is not really a secret anymore if it's in the client. So the recommended thing here is to make a regular ASP.NET controller that talks to the database, and in your Blazor view, you use HTTP to talk to that controller and get the data like a regular REST API. So depending on you running on a client or a server, you might want to choose different approaches. And how do you learn more about this instead of this super fast intro? Well, you can go to aka.ms/intro to Blazor. And this will take you to a learning path on Microsoft Learn that gives you examples and exercises and things like that. So that will probably take about like 5 to 8 hours maybe to read through and do all the exercises. So you will get some more information than I've shown you here today. And with that, I'm ready for questions.
Great, Johan. Thank you. Wait, if I remove this, can you see the screen now?
Yes, I'm switched back to so I can see.
Yes. So first of all, we have people tuning in from Brazil to Canada, from Europe. So that's really great. Wait, let me just find the questions.
We're really all over the place.
Yes. Yes, Michael is asking, can we use offline scenario with Blazor?
Yes, you can absolutely use offlines. And if you use the Blazor WebAssembly things, that runs completely in the browser, and it can work offline. And you can also, when you create a new project, at least from Visual Studio, you can just check a checkbox and make it an sorry, I forgot what it was called. Like a single page application web manifest. So it works very well offline if you need to.
Thank you. Next question is how that comes from Scott. And he's asking, can an error message come from a resource file?
Yes. It works more or less exactly the same as it does in MVC or web APIs. So that would definitely be preferred to hard code strings. So yeah, absolutely resource files.
Thank you. And Michelle, I guess Michelle, is asking, what is the best way, using code in the page or in the code behind?
Yeah. Which is the best
Question?
color? Yeah. Before I started working a lot with React, I would say, yeah, code behind everything. Don't want to mix code and markup. But the more I work with React, and that's basically the only way, I feel it's kind of nice to do that. So I guess this is like a depends. It depends answer. I would probably use code in the page if it's not that much code, and maybe switch your code behind if it's more code. But on the other hand, if your view is starting to get a lot of code, maybe you need to do some refactoring anyway. So yeah, it depends. I think you need to maybe look at this specific scenario and try to figure out what works best in that scenario.
Maybe Michelle can drop in the chat, if you can, Michelle, drop in the chat a specific scenario so that Johan can answer it more specifically. But thank you. Next question comes from Oliver. Is Blazor preferred to MVC?
I think Blazor and MVC solves kind of different problems. MVC is like it's just rendered on the server, and you send HTML to the client, and that's that. So it's more like a classic server and website, where Blazor is more meant to be a client-side framework where interactivity happens more in like real-time scenarios in the server. And maybe I would rather compare Blazor to React or Angular or some single page application framework than MVC. So for a regular website, I probably would use MVC because of like search engine optimization, and it can load really fast. But Blazor might be better for if you're building like an application that needs a lot of interactivity and you really want to use C# in the browser. So depending on what you want to build, I would choose one or the other. So definitely not replacing MVC, more adding more front-end stuff with C#.
Thank you. And a follow-up question from Oliver. You've kind of, I think, touched on it, but maybe you can dig deeper.
I think
the pros and cons.
The pros of Blazor would be that it runs in the browser, so it's better for interactive applications. And pros of MVC is that it's already rendered and you can optimize things to be search engine optimized. And so, MVC for regular websites, Blazor for applications, I would say.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, Oliver says thanks as well. Okay, another question from Scott. How do you secure data stored locally in the browser? I saw a link in the presentation, but of course I cannot access it.
Good question. And the answer is that as of right now, you can't store secrets in the browser, so you can't secure it. But in .NET 7, we will have access to the crypto .NET libraries. And then you can actually store secure data locally in the browser. So you can store encrypted data in local storage or session storage, for instance. So if you wait, like I think it will be released in November, so soon you can absolutely do that.
Thank you. Marlin is asking, why should he or she migrate from MVC to Blazor?
Well, good question. Is it not enough just that it's cool? No? You need a better reason. As I was said before, I think MVC and Blazor solves different problems. So if you're building more like an application that needs a lot of interactivity, I would probably use Blazor instead of MVC. But for more websites, things that more present data than interact with data, MVC would probably be better. So they use the same technologies, but they kind of solve different problems. So you need to look at what you're actually trying to solve to know which one you would use. And
thank you.
I don't think Blazor in any way replaces MVC. It more adds more front-end capabilities to the ASP.NET stack.
Thank you. And then Marlin just dropped here. Are there any resources or videos to walk through the migration from MVC to Blazor? I don't know if your Learn module covers that.
I have seen a large Microsoft site and also an ebook that talks about migrating from web forms to Blazor. I think that also touches on MVC migrations, but it's definitely more focused on web forms. I don't have that link ready now, but Erika, is it possible for us to communicate with everyone after the session? Or I can do it like this. How do I write in the chat?
You can send me a link on the private chat, and then I can drop that because it's only me, the admin, who can use
we can do it like this. If you want me to send you the link to this migration guide, send me an email at jnordberg@microsoft.com. And maybe, Erika, can you post my email in the chat so it's easier for them to find it?
Just a second.
So just drop me an email, and I will get back to you to the link to this migration guide. Perfect. Thank you.
So yeah, you guys can reach out to Johan with any questions via email. We did have more questions. Wait, I think I lost.
Yeah, we have from Space Shot.
Space Shot. Where do you see it? Space Shots. Wait, we have one before. We have had another one before. That's a Twitch. That comes from Twitch. So that does Blazor WebAssembly also work on mobile devices? I guess the whole net runtime is loaded on the device before it works.
Yes, it does work on mobile browsers as well. And as you said, you need to download the runtimes. So it's a kind of big download, like at least a megabyte, since you need to download .NET stuff. But it absolutely works, and it works. I haven't really tried that much, but I think it works quite well on modern phones.
Thank you. Wait, where are we? Who is next? Space Shot. Yes. So some people, he says, some people prefer a controller-based paradigm. Blazor isn't that. It's a component-based framework like React. Blazor Pages is page-based. These paradigms are popular on many platforms and languages. Do you have a comment on that, Johan?
Yeah, it's not really a question, but you're absolutely right. This is much more like React or Angular, especially React, I think, than MVC. So I would think of Blazor as the like React for C# developers, almost like it solves much of the same problems. So if you're a .NET developer that loves C#, Blazor will be amazing for doing front-end stuff. And if you're already using React for everything, maybe you might as well continue doing that, depending on what you like. Personally, I use React for almost everything, but I also use .NET a lot for backend stuff, and I love C#. So right now I'm like, what I'm gonna choose.
Which tie to put on? Which language to write?
Exactly. I love my first child or my second child the most.
Thank you. Let's see. We have answered Marlin's. And then, BSD guy says, you are awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
And then we have another one from Scott. Thank you, Scott, for all these questions. It's great. It's great to see the chat so alive. What is the next big feature for Blazor coming up that you are most excited about?
Yeah, the changes coming in .NET 7 is not that big as the .NET 6 things. So I think the things in .NET 7 that I'm most excited about are also the the kind of the only two that I actually remember. So that maybe says something. But it's like we were into before, the history state, be able to get data when you navigate between pages without having to add that to the URL or query string, and also the crypto stuff, so you can store secrets in the browser. And when it comes to .NET, like even version numbers are pretty big, and odd version numbers like 7 are usually pretty small. So I guess we can expect the .NET 8 version that comes next November will have a lot more new features.
Thank you. We don't have any more questions. We've been bombarded though.
Yeah, there is a pre-page, the last one I can see is from
Oh,
Nerd
yeah.
Herder, awesome name.
Yeah.
Pre-page,
Pre-page
redirect, and preempt. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds cool.
something to implement.
Is it like if we want to stop a page from navigating away?
Um,
Yeah, okay. Like is page dirty? You can handle. Yes, you can do that. You can in your forms you can like mark it as dirty, and then you can use Navigation Manager to stop navigating away. So you can, for instance, if you're filling out a form or something, and you accidentally click on a link that navigates away, you can present a confirm box that asks, do you really want to leave this page? And have an okay, cancel, and stop the navigation if you want to. Yes.
Thank you. And we have another one from, can you use a camera from Blazor?
I mean, you can always access JavaScript, and you can even use regular JavaScript frameworks or like helper libraries together with Blazor. So since it's in a browser and the browser has access to the camera, I guess yes. Would it be? Is there a ready component that we can use that use the camera? Don't know. Build one.
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
Regarding the camera in .NET MAUI, that is more for install apps than web apps. Then you can get access to all the hardware you want, like a regular native mobile app. So maybe that can be a useful thing if you want to do more camera-based stuff that don't have to run in the browser and still use C# and the same technologies that we talked about today.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't have any more questions, but yeah, it's just Scott saying thank you. Michael, I don't know. Says yeah, great presentation, and he or she will probably use Blazor for the next app. So yay!
Perfect.
No, we do have wait. Marlene is asking, will Blazor with Signal R improve the performance over MVC?
Yeah, I think it will do, since when you navigate between pages, or you do you click a button that updates something, you don't need to do a full page refresh that reloads everything. You only need to update like a div tag that actually changed the content. So you have much less data to fetch between updates. So for more dynamic sites that updates content in the browser, it will definitely improve. Yes.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Johan, for such a great presentation and firing back at the questions. Yeah. It's been great. Guys out there, thank you so much for watching tonight. Of course, this session is going to be available on demand in a day or two, so you can always rewatch. And let me just put the link here again. Go to aka.ms/intro to Blazor to follow the learn module to get your hands dirty and get really into this session and what you have learned today. So yeah, thank you so much once again, Johan. I will let you to enjoy your evening today, and you guys out there have a great evening, day, morning, wherever you're tuning in from. And hope to see you again soon at another Microsoft Reactor Stockholm session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.